temple, and our theme this year is Kesher, the power of human connection. And so already we've had some wonderful services surrounding that theme, but our amazing membership director, Mel, where is Mel? There she is, Mel Bordelon, did some research to find who we wanted to be our keynote speaker for the summer. And we found an amazing human, Logan Ury, who's with us tonight, is a behavioral scientist turned dating coach and the author of the best-selling book, How to Not Die Alone, The Surprising Science That Will Help You Find Love. She's the host of the Netflix series, The Later Daters, from the executive producer, Michelle Obama. She works as Hinge, for those of you who don't know, is a dating app. Swipe right, swipe left, all sorts of things like that. She is the director of relationship science and has a private coaching and matchmaking business. She studied psychology at Harvard and ran Google's behavioral science team, the Irrational Lab. That's a cool name. She lives in the Bay Area with her husband, Scott, and their toddler. So, Logan, welcome. We'd welcome you to our Bima. So glad that you're here with us tonight. Welcome, welcome. We, over the next year, we'll be covering a lot of issues about human connection. We thought the natural one, of course, is to start about romantic connections, but I believe some of this science and some of the things you hear tonight won't be just limited to dating and marriage and things, although that is the thrust of certainly Logan's work. So let's just jump right in. What does it mean to take a scientific approach to love?
Well, thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome.
Shalom.
Shabbat
I just
shalom.
wanted to say I was very moved by the service. And I grew up going to Jewish day school, but in the Bay Area, I don't belong to a synagogue. But just being among all of you, it just, this is what so many people online are saying that they're missing, like the third space and the connection in the community and just greeting people. And so I'm so glad that we can all be here tonight celebrating this. And I think you're already embodying Kesher and connection.
Thank you so much. So talk to us about science. I mean, love feels like feeling, and that has nothing to do with science. So what does that mean, the science of love?
Yeah, so, I love that we have people of all different ages here tonight, and some people who are already married, some people who are looking for love, some people who are maybe 2 decades away from that. But who you decide to marry is one of the most important decisions that you'll ever make, maybe the most important. And research shows that it defines your health, happiness, and overall life satisfaction. But unlike things like nutrition or exercise or personal finance, people sort of seem allergic to applying science to it, and they want it to be this ethereal, romantic thing that we can't explain. But the truth is there's this amazing field called relationship science with really valid research going back 60 plus years. And so what I like to do is take the best of that research and really bring it to people to help you understand mostly how to get out of your own way and find love.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so one of the things that I focus on a lot is this idea of the type. So many people are so focused on I have one type of person that I need to meet. And when I'm working with people as a dating coach, I often say, well, that's the type you've been going for, but it hasn't worked out. Maybe the type that you wind up with is going to be completely different. And so then I like to tell people, I didn't have redhead, vegan, 5'8" engineer as my type. But that's, of all the many people I dated, that's who made me happiest. That's who I've been with for 11 years. And so I feel like I really learned how to understand that type is just like our initial blueprint, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the final architecture of who we're with. And so really helping people understand that often our type is just the initial thought, and that many people wind up with someone who's completely different from that checklist they had originally made.
Now you got me on a tangent here.
Great,
so
let's do it.
how do you know when to go on a second date, but more importantly, how to go on a 5th date?
Oh, I love this. Okay, so there's actually some new recent research that just came out about this topic. And so this kind of comes up all the time where people say, on the first date, I just felt okay about the person. Should I go on a date with them again? And so my feeling is if you feel 0 out of 10 excited about them, that's not going to grow. But if there's something there that you're curious about, then that second date can really help you understand it. And the research shows that after the first date, our feelings really change. After the second date, our feelings really change. But after the third date, they sort of stay steady. So if you're unsure, give until the third date. But after the third date, you're not that into them, I don't think there needs to be a fifth date.
Gotcha. I'm obligated to ask this question as a rabbi. You just mentioned that you grew up Jewish. Has being Jewish influenced your work in any special way?
Yes, definitely. So one of my favorite concepts in Judaism is the idea of kavanah, intent. And there's this wonderful quote from the 11th century that a prayer without kavanah is like a body without soul, that you need to pray with kavanah. And I remember when I was growing up, I was really close to my aunt, and she was telling me how she had gone to a continuing education class about Judaism and how one of the lessons was kavanah. What is the intent when you meet your partner, when you meet your husband? Not for the first time, but like at the end of the day. And so it's like, you have a busy day at work, everything's so chaotic, you like run into your house like a hurricane. Is that the energy you want to bring in? No. How can you take a moment at the doorstep and say, what is the kavanah? What is the intent that I want to bring to this interaction? And actually, over the last 10 years, I've seen this kind of become a trend in dating. People talk about intentional love, dating intentionally. I want to find an intentional partner. And I do feel like there's something deeply Jewish to that, to really thinking about your intention before you decide if I'm ready to date, who should I date, should we move in together, etc.
So as a rabbi and a therapist, I work on this theory that there's an inverse relationship. The closer we are to somebody, the more we take them for granted. And marriage in Hebrew is kiddushin, which means holiness. It ought to be the most important, that person ought to be the most important person to whom you give the most consideration. Like saying thank you when a meal is made, or, offering to do something kind that you might not otherwise do for somebody else. Is that what you mean by intention in that regard?
Yes, I think in dating, it just has to do with why am I here? What am I about? What am I ready for? And I think a lot of people just date to date, or they date because they think they should, or they're just like everyone else is dating. But it's that inner reflection of what do I want to happen in this moment? Do I want to go on a date with to connect with someone? Or am I really here to just check the box? Yep, mom, I'm dating. Here I am. And so it's really about, in dating, deciding how do you want to show up. And then I think in a committed partnership, it's saying, who do I want to be around my kids? Like if I have a lot of work stress, how can I put my laptop down when my kids are around? If my partner had a hard day, how can I listen to them instead of just trying to solve their problem? And so it's, that idea of like between like action and reaction, there's a space. That's really the space where you can reflect and have that kavanah and have that intention.
Wow, it's very powerful. Thank you. I should have mentioned this to you the other day, but I have another theory that I don't know how you're going to answer. But I tell people who are in the dating world, the apps are a good place to do it. Yeah. 90% of the weddings I do, and maybe a higher percentage, are people who've met online and who, no matter what age you are, from people, senior citizens to younger people, have met online. But I always say it's like a science project. It's a 30-to-1 shot. You got to go on 30 dates before you find a person you connect with. But that date might be the second date you go on with, the second person you go with, not the 30th. But you got to give it 30 tries. Am I even close?
Yeah, I might have to check your math, Rabbi.
Yes, sorry. well, give me a sense.
No. A lot of what you said is true. So since 2017, according to research from Stanford, dating apps are the #1 place that people meet. So they overtook meeting through friends and family, meeting at work. And so a lot of people have this love-hate relationship with apps where it feels like, it's not the most fun thing to have to market yourself online in this 2D format, but that's where the majority of couples are meeting. And it makes sense to me that you're saying 90% of the couples you marry are meeting online. And so for people who don't love dating or don't love dating apps, it's sort of like the LSAT. You have to study for the LSAT, but that's not the same experience as being a lawyer. And you have to get good at dating and have a great profile in order to meet someone and then hopefully never have to date again.
Ah, very good, very good.
I have one more Jewish thing that I wanted
Bring
to
it
talk
on.
about. So one of the things I loved about going to Jewish day school was how much we were encouraged to ask questions, that there really is the Socratic method, and that the Talmud is basically like a very long debate. And so much about Judaism is that, the deeper scholar you are, the more questions you have. And I feel like in relationships, asking great questions, asking open-ended questions, really caring about the answer is such a deep part of connection. And that in couples therapy and when partners need to reconnect after there's been a mistrust and betrayal, so much of that work is really asking questions and really listening to the answer.
Yeah. So what would you say is the greatest mistake people make in dating?
So many. But one thing that I really focus on in my work is this idea of unrealistic expectations. And so I have this framework called the 3 dating tendencies. And these are the most common daters that I encounter who are struggling to find love. So the first one is the maximizer. And as I'm saying these, maybe think of someone in your head who's like this. They could be single or not. So the maximizer is the person who feels like, I need to research my way to the right answer. If I'm going to buy a Bluetooth speaker, I need to read every single report and study everything. And when they apply that to dating, what it means is they keep dating and keep dating and keep dating because they feel like they're only one swipe away from the perfect person. And what they don't realize is that a lot of dating and marriage is finding somebody great, committing to them, and building that great relationship. It's not, 95% who you find and 5% working on it. A lot of it is just choosing someone, committing, and making it great. So they have unrealistic expectations of their partner. The second type is called the romanticizer, and they have unrealistic expectations of love. So they expect happily ever after, everything's going to be easy, maybe they're into The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, things like that. They want the rose. And it's easy for them to get into relationships because they're very romantic, but then as soon as there's a problem, they give up and they say, this must not be my soulmate. And so for those people, it's about really understanding that relationships are about working it out, not just having this prince and there's no problems. And then the last type, and I know a lot of these are the hesitator, and they have unrealistic expectations of themselves. So this is the kind of person who says, I'm just not ready to date. I need to lose 10 pounds. I need a better apartment. I need a better job. And they feel like they need to do work on themselves before anyone could love them. And the work for them is really putting themselves out there and understanding that a lot of that work happens while you're in a relationship, and that's how you grow. You don't have to one day wake up and be 100% ready. You can put your imperfect self out there, and you will meet another imperfect person, and you can both grow together.
That's really nice. And then you become complete in some way. When your imperfection meets somebody else's imperfection in a positive way.
And we're always growing.
Absolutely. So given that, do you believe in love at first sight?
I wonder what you all think I think, but no, I definitely don't. And the stats on this are really interesting. So only 11% of people say that they experience love at first sight. And we actually just did some new research at Hinge that sort of finds the same thing to be true, is that attraction is really something that grows when the two of you are together. It's not just like seeing a hot person and saying like, ooh, I want them. And there's actually these 3 myths of the spark that I see perpetuated all the time, and TikTok and rom-coms and everywhere online. So the first one is people believe that if you're going to work out with someone, you need to have instant chemistry. And that's, as we said, not true, because a lot of times relationships grow. That's why people marry somebody at work, or they marry someone on their kickball team. The more we're exposed to someone, the more they grow on us. The second myth is that if you feel a spark, it must be a good thing. I'm sure we've all felt that spark with someone, and it's really exciting when you have those butterflies and that chemistry, but that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean that actually it's anxiety that you're confusing as, it's alarm bells, but you feel like it's your heart palpitating, and you actually feel anxious because you don't know how they feel about you. Or maybe that person's really narcissistic. Maybe that person's just really good looking, and they give the spark to everyone. I mean...
Stop.
That happens to me all the time where I'm like, wow, I really had a spark with that person. And then all my friends are like, yeah, me too. So you know who you are if you're very sparky. And then the last one is that just because you did have a spark, it doesn't mean the relationship is viable. I talk to people who are divorced all the time who stayed in the wrong relationship because they met the right way. And so the day that you meet, let's say you're together for 50 years, is 0.0055% of your total relationship. So who cares how you met? Who cares if there was such a big spark? It's really about the connection that the two of you have, and forget about the spark and instead go after the slow burn.
I like that. And there's energy in a slow burn just as there is in a spark. And the slow burn lasts longer.
A lot longer.
Yeah, beautiful. Tell me, in your research over more than a decade now, anything surprise you? A stat that came out and said, oh my gosh, that doesn't feel true to me, but it actually was?
Yeah, so one stat that I think about a lot that might be particularly interesting to a Jewish community is that a lot of women on the dating apps set their height filter at 6 feet or taller. And 86% of men in the United States are under 6 foot. And so these women are filtering out a lot of guys, probably a lot of nice Jewish guys. And then they come to me and they say, there's no one out there, there's no one on my app, my hinge is broken. And then I look at their filters and I say, you can expand your age radius, you can expand your geographic radius, and definitely expand this height filter.
Very good. Yeah. Thank you for telling them that. On behalf of all men under 6 feet, thank you. Something so interesting, your Netflix show, which has really taken off later daters, it focuses on singles who are 55 or older. From your work with dating coaching and matchmaking clients in that age range, what have you found that has been kind of interesting about it? And what is the easier part of dating when you're older, and what's, of course, the more difficult part?
Well, I have to give a shout out to my new favorite later daters, Eileen and Steve.
Yeah.
Yes, if you don't know, they got married in their 70s and 80s, and it's just really inspiring to hear stories like that. And I think that's the point of the later daters, is that you're never too old to find love. You're never too old to believe that you can find love, and that's really what I do on the show. One thing that I learned when I was working on the show is that a lot of things about dating when you're older have changed. So since 1990, the number of divorces for people over 50 has actually doubled. So this is the increase of a topic called gray divorce. And people are living a lot longer. And if you're 60 and you're going to live for another 30 years, you're not just going to suck it up. If you're not in a great relationship, you're going to try to get out of it. And so there is this whole new group of people dating. It's also interesting to think that people who are 55 plus look a whole lot different than they did a few generations ago. So on the Golden Girls, they were supposed to be in their 50s. And just, that's the age of Jennifer Aniston and Jennifer Lopez and all these like super attractive, popular people. And so, first is just acknowledging that people are aging in a different way. So some of the things I've learned from doing the show. The advantages of dating when you're older include the fact that you can really have a different type of partnership. There's something called living apart together. That's very common, where you're in a committed relationship, you might be married or not, but you don't necessarily want to combine your finances or combine your home, and that is a great option that people can do. People are also open to dating a different type of person. If you needed to be with someone of the same religion to raise kids, it's a little different when you both have already had kids or not. You can date someone that maybe appeals to who you are at 60 that didn't appeal to you at 20. So there's a lot more flexibility. And people also know themselves better. They are more sure of who they are. They're making more informed decisions. And I know this is a mixed age audience, but they also report having better sex because they say that they know themselves and their bodies more. And so there's actually some really interesting research on the Singles in America survey that really speaks to kind of this embodied part of dating when you're older.
So interesting. It is. I mean, that's not a biographical comment. That's just the truth. Let me ask you this. In thinking about long-term relationships, what have you learned that matters most and what matters least?
Yeah, so when I was writing my book, this was something that I really wanted to figure out. And so I looked at a lot of research. I spoke to a lot of experts to understand what are the things that we think matter more than they do and what are the things that matter less. So two of the things that matter less are looks and money. Of course, they're nice to have, but there's this idea called adaptation that basically over time we get used to our surroundings and they no longer kind of please us or hurt us in the same way. And so there's this interesting research when you ask people, how much do you think your life would change if you won the lottery? People way over exaggerate how much it would change their lives. A year later, most lottery winners go back to their same level of happiness as before. And the same is also true with if you say to somebody, if you became paralyzed, if you became a quadriplegic, how much would that impact your life? And in the opposite direction, people think every single thing would change, but a year later, a lot of those people are back to the same level of happiness. So with looks and money, they're great, but you get used to what's around you. Another one that people think matters more than it does is having the same hobbies. I'm sure a lot of the couples here who've been together for a long time have totally different hobbies. And that's okay. You don't have to love pickleball as long as you don't begrudge the person when they want to go play pickleball. And so it's about having that complementary bond, not being the same. And that's also true for personalities. So I see this with younger people, but they're like, I'm so extroverted. I love to party. I need someone just like that. And the truth is, no, two of you in a relationship would be way too much. You actually, that's how I feel about myself. You need someone to balance you out. And now I'll talk about the things that matter more than people think they do, and that I wish people would come to me and say, I'm looking for someone with these qualities. So the first one is kindness. I think that in general, we just forget how important kindness is, and that it's something that sticks with you for your whole life. And no one ever regretted having a kind partner. A related one is loyalty. And so you can look for someone who has friends for many parts of their lives and, help somebody move, help somebody in a tough time. Another one is the idea of a growth mindset. So there's a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is the idea that you can get better at things, you can develop your skills. If you fail, you can keep trying. A fixed mindset is the idea that you're either born with the skill or you're not, and that if you try something and you're bad at it, you should just give up. And of course, you want to align yourself with someone with the growth mindset, because as the relationship inevitably has a hard moment, you want to be with someone who believes that it can grow. And then the last one, which has really become my favorite and maybe the one that matters most of all, is what side of you the person brings out. And why that's so important is that a lot of times we see someone and on paper, on the app, they're perfect. Oh, they have this job, they have a similar family, they're really cute. But when you meet them, you have nothing to talk about, or you feel anxious around them, or you're unsure how they feel about you. And so what really matters is not sort of the instruments that you each play. You're not doing a solo. It's about when the two of you come together, what music do you make as a pairing?
Thank you. So this might be the most important question for this crowd. Many people in our congregation who are here tonight already are married, which is wonderful, but I bet most of them have someone in their lives who is single and looking for love. How can everyone here support their single friends?
Oh, thank you. I love this question. So I think the first thing is introducing the great people that you know to each other. And there's almost a cliche of like in a synagogue of, the people saying, you need to meet my daughter and this and that. But I think in reality that doesn't happen that much. And I think there's some reasons for it. I think it's actually pretty vulnerable to set someone up, because what if the person gets mad at you because they don't think the person you set them up with is good enough? And what does that mean about how you feel about them? But it's a vulnerability that's really worth it. And I can tell you from talking to thousands of single people a year, they want to be set up more, and it makes them feel seen, and it's helpful to them, because a lot of people are sick of the dating apps, and there's not a ton of in-person events where people are meeting. And so even if you take 5 minutes tonight and you say, oh, who is a great single person that I know? And could I send them a photo of this other great single person? And, it's such a, oh, do you have a person you're thinking of? Okay, there you go. Yeah, let's do some mitzvot tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, yeah, the first thing I want to say is set people up, obviously get their consent, but it really is important. And the other one is a big complaint I do hear from people is kind of when people say, it'll happen when it happens. I actually don't think that advice is helpful. I mean, you can tell by my orientation, I think a lot about intentionality and taking action. And I think that advice is actually kind of like the book Let Them. It's sort of just like permission to let things go by you and kind of not take action or responsibility. And I think it's not just it'll happen when it happens. It's like Eileen and Steve would not have met if they hadn't been on the app and taking a risk. And so every single couple that I know is together because they took an action to have the kesher and the connection. And so it's not about it'll happen when it happens. It's also about being ready and being open to connection.
It's so brilliant. I've told a number of people, the last couple of years I've been working on this definition of love. That is being vulnerable with somebody without feeling judged by them. And you're giving a new nuance to it, and that is be vulnerable enough to allow yourself to be open to fall in love. Mm-hmm. And as a friend, be vulnerable enough to take the risks to set somebody up so that they can fall in love. I like that piece of vulnerability because I think it does require either the person who's setting them up or the person going on the date to allow themselves to be a bit vulnerable. And that risks being hurt, but the upside is really incredible as well.
Yeah, it is vulnerable to insert yourself into someone's life. And you can always tell yourself a story. They don't need it. If they wanted it, they would do this. But let's try to take that vulnerability and just own it and say the outcome would be so great. And if they want to say no, they can. But it's a way of showing that you care and saying, I think you're really great and worthy of love, and I want to help you find it.
Wonderful. Take one or two questions from the congregation. We have just a couple minutes left. Anybody have a question? Yes, Shoshana, please, nice and loud. Nice and loud. So let me just repeat the question for people online so they can hear. The question is about people often complain in therapy that they're not listened to, and it's exacerbated by the fact that nobody talks to anybody anymore. We text or we're on social media, and there's like 3 divisions before you get to an in-person conversation.
I love this question, and it's something that I've thought about a lot. So the term that I use for it is when you go on a date with someone and they don't ask you any questions, I call it ZQ, 0 questions. And so people say, oh, Logan, I just went on this date with this ZQ guy. And so I think it is very common, and I love how you connected it to technology because I think it is true. Like until the age of the internet and social media and the comment board, not every single person in the world thought they had to comment on every single thing happening at every single time. And people are doing a lot more sharing than they are listening. And so I think the lesson there almost goes back to what we were talking about with Judaism and asking questions, which is that there's such a beauty in asking a question and there's such a beauty in listening, and that the research on great dates and people who are very well liked is that people like people who are interested, not interesting. And so sometimes somebody talks for 10% of the conversation and the person who talked for 90% says, wow, they were fascinating. And what they mean is they gave me a lot of space to talk. And so I think we can all do a better job at not being ZQ, of asking questions, asking deep follow-up questions, and really understanding that dates are an exchange and a connection, and it's not, a therapy session or a chance to monologue.
Excellent. Any other questions? Yes, Misha. So the question is, how is AI influencing people who don't really date real people, they're dating their AI program?
It's a great question, and I don't know if you're a plant from the rabbi, because he did want us to maybe talk about the male loneliness crisis and things like that, but I think all of these things are related. So first I'll talk about the fact that AI will probably be integrated into dating apps soon, and in some ways it already is. And so that probably is the future of dating apps, is they'll have a conversation with you, they'll get a lot more information, they'll do a match, they'll tell you exactly why this person is your connection. And so I do think sort of if we're in dating app like 3.0 right now, AI will definitely be the next one. But I think the more interesting part of your question is what will happen to future generations who grew up with AI relationships? And my answer is that I'm very concerned about it. If you have an AI girlfriend, she never tells you to pick up your socks. She never is too tired. She never isn't interested. She doesn't require any emotional caregiving. She's just, always on. And I think that if you have that during these critical years of puberty and kind of figuring out what a relationship means, how are you then going to go to have an adult relationship with a real person? And so I'm worried about it. I don't have the answer. Probably there will be some percentage of the population in the future that has those relationships and isn't partaking in, IRL, in real life relationships. And you could argue, like, for some of those people, maybe it's better than if they didn't have anyone. But I'm pretty worried about adolescents that are spending a lot of time with chatbots and then establishing norms within themselves of empathy and listening and dealing with the real friction of relationships, and then what's going to happen when they're trying to date a real person.
Well, I think that we talked about artificial intelligence. You have given us real intelligence tonight. Not only the statistics, but also the soul of what we're talking about. And I love that you combine kind of a scientific orientation to real life human issues. And you are always welcome back at our congregation. I hope you'll stay for the Oneg so people get a chance to talk to you as well. And let's give Logan a big round of applause. Thank you so much.